26-year-old woman had her entire world turned upside down when she discovered that the real voice recording of a murderer at the end of a movie sounded exactly like her father.
지금부터 돈을 회수할 때까지 아이는 굶기겠습니다.
At first, she thought it was just a coincidence and didn't pay much attention to it. But then the killer said another famous line.
벌써 포기한 겁니까? 제가 뭐라고 했죠? 끝나는 그 순간까지 끝난 게 아닙니다.
She was completely stunned because that was the exact phrase her father, the man who had raised her alone, always loved to say. Even the classmate who watched the movie with her exclaimed that it was her father's voice.
야, 다은아 진짜 미안한데 야, 얘네 아빠 목소리랑 좀 비슷한 것 같지 않냐?
너 지금 무슨 소리 하는 거야? 미쳤어?
Although she continued defending her father on the surface, a seed of suspicion had already been planted in her heart. That night, she hid in her room and replayed the recording again and again. The voice, the tone, and even the way the words were pronounced were identical to her father's. But no matter what, she couldn't believe that her usually timid father, the man who didn't even dare fight back after being slapped by a drunk woman, could actually be the twisted killer who brutally murdered a child and threw him into a river years ago. It wasn't until a mysterious man appeared that the warm illusion surrounding her family was completely shattered. Only after the statute of limitations for the case had almost expired did her father finally reveal his horrifying other side.
끝날 때까지 끝난 게 아니잖아.
This is the Korean crime thriller Blood and Ties, inspired by one of South Korea's 3 major unsolved cases, the real-life Lee Hyun-ho kidnapping and murder case. The story begins with a shocking kidnapping case that happened in South Korea in 1988. A 5-year-old boy was kidnapped, and although his parents followed the kidnapper's demands and paid a ransom of 100 million Korean won, the criminals still cruelly knocked the boy unconscious, stuffed him into a suitcase, and threw him into a river, causing his death by drowning. The only evidence the police had was a phone recording left by the kidnapper and a ransom note. But with millions of people around, finding a kidnapper based only on these 2 vague clues was like searching for a needle in a haystack. On top of that, forensic technology was still underdeveloped at the time. After a year of massive investigation efforts in Seoul, the police still made no progress, and the case eventually became an unsolved mystery. In the blink of an eye, 14 years passed. According to South Korean law, the statute of limitations for this type of criminal case was only 15 years. Once that deadline passed, even if the real culprit was discovered later, the authorities would no longer be able to convict or punish them. The killer would be completely free from criminal responsibility under the law. And at that moment, only 2 weeks remained before the 15-year deadline expired. At this critical moment, a new director turned the shocking kidnapping and murder case into a movie using a mockumentary style. As the film became a hit, the kidnapping case that had been forgotten for more than a decade once again returned to the public eye. After watching the movie, many viewers felt that the kidnapper's voice sounded like someone they knew, so they began calling the police to report their suspicions. The police immediately formed a special investigation team, determined to solve the case before the deadline and give the victim's family justice. After several days of hesitation and inner struggle, Da-eun also decided to secretly investigate her father. She first checked her father's phone records and messages, but found nothing unusual. Seeing no clues on his phone, Da-eun quietly searched through her father's computer, but there was still nothing suspicious. After thinking carefully, the only strange thing about her father Sun-man was that every Sunday, he would leave home all day claiming he was going fishing, but every night he would always return empty-handed, never bringing back a single fish. Da-eun couldn't help but suspect that her father was using fishing as an excuse to do something he didn't want anyone to know about. It was Sunday again. Sun-man left home with his fishing gear as usual, and Da-eun secretly followed behind him, wanting to uncover the truth. And finally, she discovered the real reason why her father always came home empty-handed. It turned out Sun-man really wasn't going fishing. He was only working as a designated driver outside bars to earn some extra money for the household. To make a little more money, Sun-man even helped customers clean their cars, working tirelessly without a single complaint. He stayed busy until late at night. Soon-man didn't even have time for a proper meal and only ate a few bites of bread in the afternoon to fill his stomach. Hidden inside a cafe across from the bar, Da-eun quietly watched her father's tired and humble figure, and her eyes slowly filled with tears. She finally understood how difficult life had been for her father all these years. To raise her, he had silently carried so many burdens. Just as Da-eun was overwhelmed with complicated emotions, Soon-man accepted a new customer, a young woman who was completely drunk but insisted on driving herself home. He patiently tried to convince her not to drink and drive, but the drunk woman couldn't listen and stubbornly insisted on driving herself. When she saw Soon-man blocking her car, she became furious and slapped him across the face. The honest and gentle Soon-man didn't fight back at all. He simply continued patiently trying to stop her from driving drunk. But instead of appreciating his concern, the woman prepared to attack him again. Da-eun could no longer watch her father suffer. She rushed forward, grabbed the woman's hair, and started fighting with her. The woman's friends quickly called the police, and when officers arrived, they took everyone involved back to the station, afraid that a fighting record would damage Da-eun's future career and opportunities. Soon-man knelt in front of the police and desperately begged them not to put the incident on her record. After learning the full story and understanding Soon-man's intentions, the police persuaded Da-eun and the woman to compromise. After giving both sides a warning, they allowed them to leave the station. On the bus ride home, Soon-man remained nervous and uneasy, not knowing how to explain to his daughter that he had lied about going fishing every weekend. Seeing her father looking like a child who had done something wrong, Da-eun felt deeply guilty, and all her suspicion toward him disappeared. She didn't blame her father for hiding the truth. Instead, she gently motioned for her exhausted father to rest his head on her shoulder for a while. Soon-man followed her request, and the warmth between father and daughter slowly returned. However, this peaceful life was soon completely shattered by a stranger.
정순만, 씨딸 정다은이, 26세, 대학원 졸업.
누구?
The man introduced himself as Shin Jun-young. Not only did he know everything about Da-eun and her father, but he also claimed to know some secrets about her father. He asked Da-eun to deliver a piece of paper with a phone number written on it. Meanwhile, when Soon-man saw the series of numbers Da-eun sent him by text message, his expression instantly changed. That humble old face suddenly revealed a coldness and cruelty Da-eun had never seen before. That night, while Da-eun and her father were worshipping her mother, who had passed away years ago, the man who claimed to be Shin Jun-young suddenly appeared at their door.
확 퍼질러버리기 전에 나 빨리 가져와!
지금 뭐 하시는 거?
어이 딸, 내가 재밌는 얘기 하나 해줄까? 정순만 씨 실체 같은 거 니네 아빠 별명이 삼성맨이야. 삼성맨. 씨발 삼성 장군님.
Those words seemed to trigger something dangerous inside her father. Just as the shocking truth was about to be revealed, an intense scene unfolded. Her father suddenly abandoned his usual timid appearance and violently punched Shin Jun-young.
한 번만 더 우리 집에 얼씬거리면 죽는 수가 있다.
What terrified Da-eun even more was that Shin Jun-young casually repeated the killer's famous line.
나한테 좀 잘해봐. 끝날 때까지 끝난 거 아니잖아.
Although Shin Jun-young was eventually driven away, neither father nor daughter could sleep peacefully that night. The thought that her father might be the killer kept haunting Da-eun like a curse. She had to uncover the truth herself and find out whether the man who raised her was really a murderer. The next day, she asked a police officer friend to investigate her father's background. The result left her completely devastated. The father who rarely even raised his voice had a deeply dark past. Even more horrifying was that the record showed her mother had never died. Only then did Da-eun realize that her father had not only hidden the truth and pretended to know nothing for 15 years, but even her own identity as his daughter was based on a lie. When Da-eun followed the address and found her mother, her entire worldview collapsed. Her mother was indeed alive, but she had been in a vegetative state for 26 years, and Shin Jun-young was her mother's younger brother. Da-eun's world completely fell apart, and for the first time, she had a violent argument with her father.
버리고 도망간 년은 엄마라고 할 자격도 없어.
그래서 이렇게 살아있는 엄마를 죽였어 여태까지? 지금 그 눈빛.
To force her father to tell the truth, she played the killer's voice recording directly in front of him. The killer's chilling voice echoed through the living room. but her father's acting was almost perfect. He showed no panic at all. Instead, he cried and acted deeply hurt. Even when Da-eun promised she would not call the police, her father still swore that he was not the killer. But during the final 3 days before the statute of limitations expired, Da-eun suddenly realized something while watching news about the victim's father, as the biological father who lost his child. Even after 15 years, he would definitely recognize the killer's voice, so she pretended to be a reporter conducting an investigation and found the father of the boy who had been brutally murdered. He was a respected obstetrics and gynecology director at a local hospital. During the interview, the director said something extremely strange.
기억이 나네요. 근데 저희 병원에서 분만하신 건 아닐 겁니다. 산모가 임신 중독 증세가 있어서 유산됐어요. 결국엔 성공하셨구나. 그렇게 간절하시다니.
Those words became the biggest twist at the end of the movie. Besides that, Da-eun discovered another shocking truth. The director had kept the ransom note the killer sent him years ago, but the criminal was extremely cunning. After police analysis, the handwriting was determined to have been written by an elementary school student. When Da-eun opened the note, her pupils immediately tightened. The crooked handwriting and writing habits were exactly the same as the handwriting she had when she was a child. At that moment, all the clues connected into a terrifying conclusion. When she was young, her gentle father taught her how to write. She thought it was an expression of deep fatherly love, but she never imagined those lessons were used to create a ransom letter sent to another family. At this point, it was impossible not to feel a deep sense of despair. In this cruel story, the father used a child's unconditional trust and dragged his own daughter into the consequences of his crime. Without realizing it, she became the perfect accomplice. Holding this evidence, Da-eun ran home in desperation to confront her father, but he continued pretending he knew nothing. He refused to admit anything.
가면 혼자 하지 왜 나까지 끌어들여서 범인을 만들어?
그게 무슨 소리야? 이건 그냥 받아쓰기였어.
편지 가지고 경찰서에 갈 거야. 그리고 신고할 거야.
But when the police kept narrowing down the suspects and eventually identified him through the evidence, they arrived at his home with the victim's family. As his daughter, she ultimately lost against more than 20 years of family bonds and chose emotion over the sense of justice she should have protected. She secretly hid the evidence and decided to protect the father who had loved her for 26 years.
당신 범인 맞지?
왜 이러십니까?
The moment he heard that voice, Director Han completely lost control of his emotions, because he could never forget that voice for the rest of his life. Soon-man was then knocked to the ground by the furious Director Han, suffering a serious blow to his head. Fortunately, Soon-man was not in critical condition. As long as he woke up, he would be fine. Meanwhile, Director Han begged the police to arrest him immediately. He insisted that Soon-man was definitely the killer. For 15 years, he had listened to that recording hundreds of times every single day, and he was certain he could never be wrong. But the police told him that without solid evidence, they could not make an arrest. Only after Soon-man woke up and completed a voice analysis could they determine the truth. Only 2 days remained, yet Soon-man still hadn't awakened. Heartbroken, Da-eun secretly wished he would never open his eyes. Whether he was the killer or not, she didn't want to know. She was afraid the truth would destroy her, but she was also afraid her father would spend the rest of his life suffering from a false accusation. The police then questioned Da-eun. They suspected she might have helped cover up the crime or hidden important information. The original crime was extremely brutal. The killer stuffed such a young child into a bag and threw him into the river. Deep marks were found on the victim's body, and signs of struggle were discovered inside the bag, showing just how cruel the criminal was. And now, only the daughter could make her father reveal the truth. The police hoped Da-eun would do her part to uncover what really happened. With only 20 hours left before the deadline, Soon-man finally woke up and cooperated with the police's voice recording process. Even the investigation leader admitted that all they could do now was wait for the final result. Whether Soon-man would walk into the police station for questioning or return home safely was something only fate could decide. With only 55 minutes left, the police continued the urgent voice analysis, and everyone waited nervously.
귀가하셔도 됩니다.
Because the voice analysis result did not match, Soon-man was released without charges. With only 30 minutes remaining, Da-eun still couldn't calm herself down because she continued to believe her father might be the killer. Soon after, Da-eun drove her father to a remote location. Inside the car, she kept questioning him about why he had killed the child. After endless questioning, Soon-man could no longer defend himself. Da-eun suddenly stopped the car on the roadside. This was the exact place where the little boy had been murdered. But her father continued pretending that he knew nothing. Desperate, Da-eun begged him to tell the truth because the police investigation was already over.
아빠가 말했지. 끝날 때까지 끝난 게 아니잖아.
Seeing the strange smile on her father's face, Da-eun couldn't believe it. She had only wanted to test him at the final moment, but she never expected that her father really was the killer. Her entire world collapsed. Da-eun rushed forward, crying and demanding that her father face his sins and confess. Just then, another car slowly approached them. Da-eun dragged her father toward the river. The child's spirit was still here. She wanted her father to kneel and beg for forgiveness, because her father had turned her into an accomplice too. Da-eun felt that she no longer wanted to live, but her father simply walked back to the car. Everything had been under his control, just like Soon-man's favorite saying, "It isn't over until it is truly over." The victim's father finally ended the case that had remained unresolved for 15 years by crashing his car into him. And that brings the movie to an end. See you next time.